Jenae Gagnier, known online as Miss Mercedes Moore, was a vibrant and successful Instagram model and influencer with over 2.6 million followers. At 33 years old, she had built a life many envied, filled with travel, style, and social media fame. But behind the glamorous images and high-profile persona, Jenae was a private individual who valued her family and protected her personal life. Sadly, her rising star was extinguished in the most horrifying way imaginable. On August 29, 2021, Jenae's father became concerned when she stopped responding to calls and texts. It was out of character for her not to stay in touch, and he decided to check on her at her home in Richmond, Texas, a quiet Houston suburb. Upon entering her apartment, he encountered a gruesome and heart-wrenching scene. Jenae's lifeless body lay at the bottom of her staircase, and upstairs a man, whom she had never publicly identified, was still alive but gravely injured. That man was later identified as Kevin Alexander Accordo, a 34-year-old from Florida. He had traveled over 1,000 miles, made his way into Jenae's gated complex, and murdered her in what authorities described as a murder-suicide fueled by obsession. Investigators found chilling handwritten messages scrawled on the apartment walls, disturbing rants that revealed his inner torment and emotional instability. These writings included phrases such as, "I should have stayed in Florida," and "I wish I never loved her," pointing to an imagined relationship that never existed. The Fort Bend County Medical Examiner's report later confirmed that Jenae was strangled and suffered a traumatic concussion, indicating she was assaulted before being killed. Accordo, who died at the scene from self-inflicted sharp force trauma, had left behind no signs of forced entry, which suggested that he might have stalked her movements and followed her into the complex or gained access through deception. Despite her fame and public presence, Jenae did not personally know her killer. According to police and family members, she had never met Kevin Accordo prior to the attack, and there was no known communication between them. What emerged was a deeply disturbing case of parasocial obsession, a one-sided fixation that turned violent. Accordo, it seems, had become infatuated with the online version of Jenae and constructed a fantasy that blurred the line between admiration and delusion. The tragedy rocked not only her family and friends but also the influencer community at large. Many had long feared the possibility of obsessed followers crossing real-world boundaries. Jenae's case made those fears real and urgent. It exposed how quickly admiration can devolve into control and how fame, especially online, can sometimes attract dangerous attention from strangers who feel entitled to intimacy that was never offered. In the days that followed, misinformation began spreading online about the nature of Jenae's death and lifestyle, prompting her family to speak out. They clarified that she was not involved in sex work and that she had been a victim of a completely unprovoked act of violence. Their goal was simple: to preserve her legacy and ensure she was remembered for the joyful, kind, and hardworking person she was, not just as a victim of a horrifying crime. The actual events of August 29 serve as a chilling and painful reminder of how vulnerable public figures can be in an increasingly connected digital world. Miss Mercedes Moore's story is not just about a shocking act of violence. It's about the urgent need for awareness, safety, and boundaries in the age of social media. Jenae Gagnier, more popularly known by her Instagram handle Miss Mercedes Moore, was not just a social media influencer. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, and a vibrant young woman with dreams and ambitions. Born on November 26, 1987, she lived in Richmond, Texas, where she maintained a relatively private life despite her large online following. To her millions of followers, Jenae was the epitome of beauty, confidence, and modern glamour. Her Instagram feed was filled with stylish photos, bold looks, and moments from her jet-setting lifestyle. She had cultivated a brand that many admired, a mix of fashion modeling, brand promotions, and appearances that made her a well-known figure in the world of online influence. But those closest to her knew another side of Jenae, one grounded in love for family and community. She was described by friends and family as sweet, reserved, and extremely close to her parents and sister. Despite the fame that came with her online persona, Jenae remained humble and kept her personal life carefully protected from the public eye. She was selective about who she let into her inner circle and those who knew her personally spoke of her kind heart and grounded nature. Jenae's rise to prominence wasn't overnight. Like many influencers, she worked tirelessly to build her brand, engage her audience, and represent herself authentically in a highly competitive digital space. Her success was a product of dedication and creativity, and she had plans to expand her career further in the entertainment and fashion industries. Importantly, Jenae had no known connection to her eventual killer, Kevin Accordo. The two had never met or communicated prior to the incident. This detail became central in the aftermath of her death, as her family sought to clarify that she had fallen victim to a stranger's delusional obsession. A tragic case of parasocial fixation. Understanding who Jenae Gagnier was before her life was stolen is essential to honoring her memory. She was more than a headline. She was a woman who built a life for herself with passion and care, only to have it shattered by someone who felt entitled to it. Her story is a heartbreaking example of the dangers influencers can face, and a call to respect and protect the real people behind the screens we scroll every day. Kevin Alexander Accordo was a 34-year-old man from Florida whose name would become tragically linked to the murder of Jenae Gagnier, Miss Mercedes Moore. Prior to the incident, Accordo was largely unknown to the public. He had no criminal record and no apparent history of violence or prior arrests that raised red flags. Yet beneath this unassuming surface, there seemed to be signs of deep psychological instability that ultimately spiraled into a fatal obsession. According to initial investigations and media reports, Kevin Accordo did not have a personal relationship with Jenae. In fact, her family and authorities confirmed that the two had never met in real life and had no prior contact. This pointed toward a chilling reality. Accordo had developed a one-sided, delusional attachment to Jenae through her online presence, which psychologists refer to as a parasocial relationship. In such relationships, one party, typically a fan or follower, believes they share a meaningful connection with a public figure who is entirely unaware of their existence. At some point, this obsession deepened and took a dark turn. Kevin made the decision to travel from Florida to Richmond, Texas, covering more than 1,000 miles. He found a way into the gated complex where Jenae lived. How exactly he entered remains unclear, though no signs of forced entry were reported. It's possible he followed another vehicle through the gates or used deception to gain access. Once inside, what occurred behind closed doors would become the center of a tragic and horrifying discovery. Jenae's father, concerned after not hearing from his daughter, found her deceased inside her home. Kevin Accordo was also found in the apartment, alive but in critical condition from self-inflicted wounds, including sharp force trauma to the neck. He later died at the scene. Investigators uncovered disturbing writings on the apartment walls, believed to be authored by Accordo. These messages gave insight into his disturbed mental state. Scrawled in pen or marker were rambling and disjointed statements like, "I should have stayed in Florida," and "I wish I never loved her." These writings, paired with the lack of any prior interaction between the two, painted a terrifying picture of a man who had constructed an elaborate and unreciprocated fantasy, one that ended in an act of brutal violence. Though he had no prior criminal history, Accordo's actions demonstrated clear signs of mental illness, delusion, and emotional instability. What's especially disturbing is that there were no public warnings or indicators that he was capable of such a horrific act, making this a particularly frightening case for anyone in the public eye. Kevin Alexander Accordo represents a tragic figure, not because of sympathy for his actions, but because his descent into obsession and violence could have been prevented with earlier mental health intervention. His case raises pressing questions about the dangers of online idolization, unchecked mental illness, and the real-world consequences of parasocial attachments left unaddressed. The introduction of Accordo into Jenae's life was not one of choice, familiarity, or consent. It was an intrusion, violent and final, that cost her life. Understanding who he was, and how his obsession grew into an unthinkable act, is a key part of examining this tragedy in full. The tragic crime that claimed the life of Jenae Gagnier, widely known as Miss Mercedes Moore, unfolded in the quiet suburb of Richmond, Texas, in late August 2021. What initially appeared to be a peaceful, secure gated community became the setting of an unthinkable act of violence fueled by obsession, delusion, and mental deterioration. Jenae Gagnier was a 33-year-old social media influencer and model, admired by hundreds of thousands of followers across Instagram and other platforms.
Authorities say her body was found in her apartment in Fort Bend County, along with the body of a man who killed her on Sunday. And now her family has come forward to share their heartbreak as they search for answers following this disturbing discovery.
I've moved my daughter 3 times just because of my insecurities and the freeze, of course, but she doesn't have friends by her house. I know my daughter, and when I got to my daughter's house and it was locked up and she's not answering my phone, which is not like her, I knew something was up, so I didn't hesitate to kick the door down. And what I saw, I wouldn't want any parent to go through. That's the first thing. The second thing is, which is even more hurtful.
She was known for her beauty, confidence, and engaging content. But behind the glamorous public persona, Jenae was a real person with family, routines, and a life that was ultimately invaded by a complete stranger. On the day of the crime, Kevin Alexander Accordo, a man from Florida with no known connection to Jenae, entered her apartment complex. The method of his entry remains a mystery, as there were no signs of forced entry to the property or her unit. It is believed he gained access either by tailgating a resident vehicle through the gates or using some deceptive method to get inside. Once within the complex, he found his way to her apartment. Inside her home, what took place was brutal and chilling. Jenae was found dead by her father on August 29, 2021. He had grown increasingly concerned after being unable to reach her for several days. When he arrived at her apartment, the scene that greeted him was one of horror. Authorities later confirmed that Jenae had been strangled and subjected to traumatic injuries. Though details about the specific timeline of the assault remain limited, the medical examiner ruled her cause of death as homicidal violence with strangulation and traumatic concussion. She likely endured a violent and terrifying final encounter, caught off guard by someone she didn't know and had never invited into her life. Also found at the scene was Kevin Accordo himself, alive but severely injured with self-inflicted wounds. He had used an edged weapon to cut himself multiple times, primarily on the neck. Despite initial survival, he died shortly after being discovered, and authorities declared his cause of death as suicide by sharp force trauma. What made the crime even more disturbing were the messages Kevin had written on the walls of Jenae's apartment. Phrases like, "I should have stayed in Florida," "I wish I never loved her," and "I was used for money," revealed a fractured and delusional state of mind. These writings suggest that Accordo believed he had some kind of relationship with Jenae, though no evidence has ever indicated she even knew of his existence. In fact, investigators confirmed that there was no romantic connection between the two, nor had there been any communication. Law enforcement concluded that this was a murder-suicide, but not one born from domestic conflict or a failed relationship. Instead, it was the horrifying consequence of a one-sided obsession, where a mentally unstable man crossed the boundary between fantasy and reality, ultimately ending the life of a woman who had never even spoken to him. The crime shattered the illusion of safety that many influencers and public figures rely on, especially those who live alone or openly share parts of their life online. Jenae's murder wasn't just a crime of passion. It was a chilling reminder of how parasocial relationships can spiral into danger when left unchecked. This brutal act of violence left her family devastated, her followers mourning, and the public asking how such a tragedy could happen with no warning signs or protection in place. In the aftermath of Jenae Gagnier's tragic murder, investigators worked diligently to uncover the full scope of what had occurred, how Kevin Alexander Accordo had gained access to her, and, most importantly, why. The investigation revealed a deeply unsettling truth. This was not a crime of passion or a lover's quarrel. It was the deadly result of obsession, delusion, and a parasocial fixation fueled by online imagery and fantasy. Authorities quickly identified the man found dead at the scene alongside Jenae's body as 34-year-old Kevin Alexander Accordo, a resident of Florida. He had no criminal record, and initial background checks revealed that he had never been in a documented relationship or communication with Jenae. Investigators confirmed that the two had never met, nor did they have any mutual connections. This discovery made it clear that the murder was the act of a stalker acting entirely on delusion. Upon entering Jenae's apartment, police discovered chilling evidence that Accordo had been inside for an extended period of time before the murder and his own suicide. It was believed that he had been in the apartment for at least 2 days. He had used a sharp object, possibly a knife or similar weapon, to inflict fatal injuries upon himself after murdering Jenae. The cause of her death was determined to be manual strangulation and traumatic head injuries, suggesting a brutal and physical confrontation. Perhaps the most haunting discoveries were the messages left behind by Accordo, written in pen on the walls and doors of Jenae's apartment. Investigators found phrases like, "I should have stayed in Florida. I wish I never loved her. I was used for money." These statements pointed to a deeply disturbed mental state. Investigators concluded that Accordo was under the false impression that he and Jenae had a romantic or transactional relationship, though no evidence supported that belief. There were no emails, texts, DMs, or call logs connecting them in any way. Jenae's phone and social media accounts showed no interaction with Accordo whatsoever. The investigation also revealed that Accordo had driven from Florida to Texas, a journey of over 1,000 miles, specifically to find her. This strongly suggested premeditation, though it remains unclear how he knew where she lived. It raised troubling questions about how stalkers can gather personal information about public figures, often through social media breadcrumbs or data leaks. Investigators ruled out robbery or sexual assault as motives. There were no signs of theft, and Jenae's personal items, including jewelry, electronics, and cash, were untouched. The crime was clearly driven by psychological instability rather than material gain. Mental health professionals who analyzed the case from the outside noted that this crime bore the hallmark of erotomania, a rare delusional disorder where an individual falsely believes that another person, often someone of higher status or visibility, is in love with them. Accordo may have spent months or years fixating on Jenae online, eventually becoming unhinged when his fantasy world failed to align with reality. In the final report, police labeled the case a murder-suicide stemming from unreciprocated obsession and untreated mental illness. No charges were filed against anyone else, and there were no co-conspirators involved. Jenae's family, heartbroken and devastated, cooperated fully with authorities while publicly expressing their hope that others, especially women in the public eye, would learn from the tragedy. They emphasized that Jenae had no way of knowing what was coming, and that she had never invited danger into her life. The findings made it painfully clear. Jenae Gagnier was the victim of a stranger's delusion, a woman who lost her life not because of her actions, but because of someone else's refusal to distinguish fantasy from reality. The news of Jenae Gagnier's tragic death sent shockwaves throughout social media and beyond. Known widely by her Instagram name Miss Mercedes Moore, Jenae had built a substantial online following, amassing over 2.6 million followers who admired her modeling work, vibrant personality, and confidence. Her sudden and violent death ignited a wave of grief, outrage, and reflection, not only from her family and fans, but also from fellow public figures and influencers who saw in her story a grim reminder of the dangers that can accompany online visibility. Jenae's family was devastated. Her father, Mark Gagnier, was among the first to publicly address the tragedy. In interviews and statements, he recounted the horrifying moment he discovered her lifeless body in her Richmond, Texas apartment. His raw and emotional recollections brought the reality of the situation to life. He stressed that his daughter had no prior relationship with Kevin Alexander Accordo and that the man was a complete stranger to the entire family. Mark spoke passionately about Jenae's character, describing her as loving, vibrant, and full of life. She was not only a successful influencer but also a beloved daughter and sister. Her family made it clear that she had never engaged with Accordo in any way, and that her death was the result of a deranged individual acting on his own disturbed thoughts. Her father also emphasized that she had taken reasonable steps to protect her privacy, living in a gated community, yet that had not been enough to stop the tragedy. In an effort to preserve her memory and bring meaning to the loss, her family began to advocate for greater awareness around stalking, parasocial relationships, and the mental health risks associated with obsessive online behavior. The public response was one of widespread sorrow and solidarity. Fans flooded Jenae's social media pages with messages of love, grief, and disbelief. Many expressed fear for the safety of influencers and questioned how such a horrific act could have occurred, especially given that the perpetrator was a total stranger. Numerous celebrities and fellow influencers paid tribute to Jenae. Rapper Tory Lanez, singer Megan Thee Stallion, and model Amber Rose were among those who posted heartfelt condolences, calling for more protection for women in the public eye. These tributes emphasized not just Jenae's online persona, but her humanity, a woman with dreams, relationships, and a right to safety. Jenae's death sparked important conversations across various platforms about the darker side of social media fame. It raised awareness of how online figures, especially women, can attract unwanted attention from disturbed individuals who blur the lines between reality and fantasy. The incident prompted many to reconsider what they share online, how much of their personal lives they expose, and the importance of digital safety measures. Mental health experts joined the conversation, using the moment to speak about erotomania and obsessive delusions. Discussions also emerged around policy reform, calling on platforms and government bodies to explore new ways to track online harassment, increase user safety, and support those experiencing stalking or threats. In the end, the public and family reactions were unified in their grief but also in their desire for change. Jenae Gagnier's life, though tragically cut short, became a powerful symbol, a reminder that behind every online profile is a real person, and that obsession, when left unchecked, can have deadly consequences. The tragic murder of Jenae Gagnier, widely known as Miss Mercedes Moore, casts a chilling light on several pressing issues within our society, issues that demand urgent attention. Beyond the heartbreaking personal loss felt by her family, friends, and followers, her story underscores the dangers of unchecked obsession, the vulnerabilities of public figures, and the mental health crisis that can drive individuals to acts of senseless violence. At the heart of this case lies a parasocial relationship, a one-sided connection where the follower believes they know or are emotionally connected to a public figure, despite there being no real-life interaction. Kevin Alexander Accordo, the man responsible for Jenae's death, had allegedly developed such a relationship. His disturbing behavior and final writings revealed signs of deep emotional delusion. He saw Jenae as someone he could access, perhaps even as someone who owed him attention or affection, despite the fact that they had never met. This situation serves as a stark warning about how online admiration can turn into obsession, especially when mental health issues are involved. As influencer culture continues to rise, the line between public and private life is blurred. For some, this can lead to dangerous misinterpretations of access and intimacy. The murder also reveals the dark side of online fame. Jenae lived in a gated community, a measure taken for privacy and security, yet it still wasn't enough to protect her. Her case brings into focus the growing need for digital content creators and influencers to prioritize physical and online security. Creators are often encouraged to build connections with their audience through live sessions, behind-the-scenes glimpses, and personal stories. While this fosters engagement and growth, it also opens the door for the wrong people to feel far too close. There is a growing call for influencer safety education, risk management, and the development of emergency protocols for those with large followings. Kevin Accordo's suicide notes and behavior indicated he was severely mentally disturbed. While his actions are inexcusable, they highlight a societal failure to recognize and treat individuals suffering from serious psychological conditions. The lack of adequate mental health support, combined with access to social media and unregulated internet rabbit holes, can lead unstable individuals into dangerous spirals. This case emphasizes the importance of mental health interventions and community awareness. Families, communities, and authorities need better tools and resources to identify red flags and intervene early, before another tragedy occurs. Jenae's murder also fits into a broader pattern of violence against women, particularly those who express independence, success, and confidence. Time and again, we see women who say no, women who don't respond, or women who live their lives unapologetically become targets of violence from men who feel rejected or powerless. Her case has been added to the ever-growing list of women harmed by men who couldn't handle being ignored or rejected. It's a heartbreaking reminder that asserting autonomy and living freely can still be seen as a threat, especially in the eyes of unstable or entitled individuals. Jenae Gagnier's story is not just a true crime case. It's a reflection of the complex, interconnected dangers facing women and online figures today. Her tragic end forces us to confront the uncomfortable realities of digital obsession, inadequate mental health care, gender-based violence, and influencer vulnerability. In remembering her, we must also commit to changing the systems that failed her. By advocating for safer online spaces, improved mental health care, stronger boundaries for public figures, and a cultural shift that truly respects the autonomy and safety of women, both online and off. If this story impacted you, please hit like and share it with someone who needs these safety reminders. Comment below with your own digital safety practices. Your insight might save a life. Subscribe to LAT True Crime Stories for more cases that educate and protect. Remember, awareness is our strongest
London
defense
took to her
against becoming the
Instagram to
next
express
tragic
the
headline.
impact of the law.
So happy and so funny and just so loving, and she just loved to
Right, it
joke
would be all
around.
about her.
Yeah, as it is.
We
as
wouldn't
it
be up
should
here. It would be all about you.
As it should be. That's about her. And again, we're going to remember that amazing spirit, that funny laugh, that 4'11" body, but that 8-foot tall, experience that we all got. So I appreciate her and love her, and we'll miss her forever and ever. Ever and ever.